So this is going to be a video kind of talking about all the different exotics that have came and went that have ruined PvP in one way or another. This is not going to be a complete comprehensive list because I'm bound to miss something, but I still thought it'd be kind of fun to look back on these old exotics and kind of reminisce on, the pain and suffering we all went through. The first weapon I want to go ahead and talk about is going to be Mida Multi-Tool. If you played during those earlier days of Destiny 2, you know why this is on the list. This is a gun that basically anytime you peeked around a corner, you can almost guarantee you were going to get shot by it. It's a scout rifle that could 4-tap you from any range, and with how it was back in the day and how prevalent team shotting was, it really wasn't even a 4-shot. It was more like a 2 or 3 because odds are a teammate was shooting with you. This gun was so busted, and it's still pretty good now, but it's nowhere near as good as it was way back in those earlier days of D2. Kind of keeping with the theme of scout rifles for a second, we have the Jade Rabbit. This is a gun that I don't think needs an introduction, especially now, because it's actually the bane of the Crucible at this moment. It's a easy to use weapon that can 3-tap from basically any range, and it's also the most consistent weapon to use. This gun has been good for the entirety of Destiny's life cycle, at least in my opinion, because it's just been that consistent. It 3-taps from any distance. It's never really been that bad. It's just dependent on if scout rifles are in the meta or not. And right now, it's probably the best it's ever been. Firefly and Shoot-A-Loot allows it to pick up its own ammo, so you can get special ammo from a distance with this gun. That alone makes it better than basically every scout rifle in the game. And honestly, I don't want to talk too much about this because I am viscerally actually reacting while looking at this image. It's actually making me a little bit angry, I'm not gonna lie. Because we are gonna be permanently in this meta until the end of time. Next we have Wish Ender. Bows in general I think are some of the most annoying things to try to fight against because you peek a corner and all of a sudden you lose half of your HP, but it's even worse when you give that bow wall hacks. You can quite literally see a target running around the corner so you know exactly when they shoot. I can go in on this weapon and talk about how it ruined PvP for a certain period of time, but really, just saying it has wall hacks. That's all you gotta know. You can see people through walls with this weapon. That's why it's busted. That's why it was annoying, and that's why it made me hate PvP. Ace of Spades is a hand cannon that I don't really think necessarily broke PvP in any kind of way, but I can definitely say that it was very powerful. Being able to 2-tap with Memento Mori was such a fun thing to do in the early days of Forsaken. This weapon is what I think is like the poster child of those earlier years of when we started to really get Destiny 2 back on track. This is the gun that I think most people also attribute to like those earlier years of Forsaken and Shadowkeep. It was such a fun weapon to use. It's still consistent and still very satisfying to shoot. It's one of those guns that I feel like never broke the game, but it was still always good enough to kind of be in that, that conversation of being busted. It may have never been the main thing that broke the game during whatever moment it was good, but it still was a nice add-on piece for whatever was breaking the game at that time. The Last Word. Now this is a hand cannon that has been pretty good for the majority of Destiny's life cycle, but this is also a weapon that kind of is dependent on your input method. If you're a mouse and keyboard user or a controller user, it is completely different based on what you use, but I think everybody can agree that during the Radiant Dance Machine meta, this was a menace. Being able to 3-tap from like 50 meters of range, I'm exaggerating a bit there, it was so much fun, but it was definitely busted. Being able to use this thing as a hip-fire machine from any kind of range, it was tons of fun. And even I will admit that RDMs and Last Word, it was one of those moments that definitely needed to be nerfed. Thank God they did. And even after the nerf, it's still incredibly good. Last Word, it's probably one of my favorite weapons in the entire game. It's probably the most fun weapon, I think, in the entire game. And even though it's not a candle to what it used to be, it's still very, very good. Next, we're going to talk about Arbalest and by extension also Lorenz Driver. If you played during the peak of these weapons, you know how annoying it was to fight against. It was a gun type where it felt like you were actively losing the fight when you shot the enemy because the flinch for some reason made it to where they just got the free headshot. You would flinch them a little bit and it would immediately flinch towards your head and you would get one shot by Arbalest or Lorenz Driver. It was just never fun to fight against. It was one of those one-shot metas where you basically had to pray the person didn't have ammo or you prayed they missed their shot. And 9 times out of 10, with how good the aim assist was, they never missed and it was never fun to fight against. I have no time to explain why I hate No Time to Explain, but I'll give you like one quick sentence. Getting 2-bursted. That was it. It was never fun being 2-bursted by this weapon. Honestly, I'm gonna gloss over this one because I'll get very angry very quickly. Dead Man's Tale. Now this is fortunately one of the metas I didn't have too much time with. I kind of stopped playing Destiny around this point for another game, and It's probably for a good reason, because getting 3-shot by a scout rifle from any distance while being hip-fired by that person does not sound like a fun meta to deal with. I know that people will kind of hold Dead Man Steel as a high regard weapon for how fun it was back then, but I think it's one of those weapons that it was definitely warranted for a nerf. Being able to hip fire from any distance and have perfect accuracy, yeah, I understand why they nerfed this thing, and I'm kind of grateful I didn't experience the pain points that this actually provided PvP. Conditional Finality. This is the gun that I dubbed to be kind of the bubble buster. You know exactly what I mean. Trials of Osiris, 4-4, somebody has a bubble and somebody has a Wall of Radiance, and you both pop your supers. It really depended on who had Conditional Finality ammo, because this was the best weapon for countering those supers. And eventually those supers did get a nerf, so by extension, Conditional Finality did eventually get a nerf as well. It's one of those weapons that's still pretty good nowadays, but it's not as good as it used to be. The very first energy weapon we'll go over is going to be Hard Light. If you played during this meta, you know exactly why it's busted. It's a auto rifle that had 0 range fall off, so it did the same amount of damage up close as it did at range, and it was a weapon that could shoot around corners, and on top of all of that, it's a 600 round per minute auto rifle, which just meant it shreds you. It's one of those guns that was never fun to fight against because people were just pre-firing around corners trying to get some chip damage, and that chip damage could have been the difference between winning or losing a fight. Just small things like that that made this weapon out of band. It's one of the rare times where I think auto rifles were kind of out of whack, and I say that as an auto rifle fan. Typically, I enjoy those metas, but this one, it was not at all enjoyable. Not one bit. This is one I'm going to kind of talk about quickly, but it's going to be Prometheus Lens. We all know about the laser tag weekend. It was just like 3 or 4 days of so much fun. It was a great time, and I'm glad they gave us an emblem for that. I'm very fortunate to be one of the few people who actually enjoyed that meta during that time, and it was definitely 100% definitely intentional for Xur to sell this weapon during that week. I feel like somebody at Bungie was looking out for us to give everybody an equal edge in the playing field, so thank you to that Bungie employee who sold this weapon as Xur that week. Lord of Wolves. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even really remember what year this was busted because it feels like it's been busted at least once or twice per year since its inception. It's one of those guns that just, it puts a bad taste in my mouth because it made shotguns in a place where they were uncounterable in some ways. And that's saying something. You know, shotguns are pretty uncounterable up close, but this was a shotgun that was uncounterable at medium distance. It was outranging Chaperone in some areas. That's how scary this gun was. Put this in the hands of a Titan user, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on. Lay Monarch. If there is any weapon on this list that actively made me want to quit PvP, it is this bow. I thought Wish Ender was bad, but Lay Monarch was 10 times worse. It was a bow that basically made the game unplayable, and I don't mean in a metaphorical sense, I mean quite literally, because you get shot once and you were just permanently out of the fight for like 3 to 4 seconds because you couldn't fight somebody if you were poisoned, you would absolutely lose that fight. So you had to wait for the regen, and during that time, it gave the enemy a chance to push you. So basically, you get shot once, and you're out of the fight, and you just gotta hope they don't push you. That was basically how you had to play the game. Next up, we have Cloud Strike. This is the only weapon on the list that actively felt like it punishes you for playing with your team. You weren't anywhere near your teammate and they got killed, you would get killed with them. And that was never a good feeling because it always felt like there was nothing you could do. It was never really your fault for dying, it was your teammates. And with how powerful the radius was at its peak, it really did feel like you were getting killed 3 to 4 meters away from a teammate sometimes. Obviously you can say, don't stick near teammates, etc., but at some times and some points, it was never really your fault. Your teammate is running to try to get to cover and they get sniped while they're on their way to cover, and you were already in the cover and you died. It just, sometimes it was the teammate's fault and there was nothing you would do against it, and it was just not fun to fight against. Dead Messenger. This was busted for like the first few weeks of Witch Queen, and it was mainly because it was just a quick and easy enabler for a melee kill. You shoot this at your own feet, deal damage to an enemy, and then melee them and get the free kill. It was something that was never really too busted, I think, in terms of the grand scheme of how busted some of these metas might have been, but fighting against it was never fun. Lodestar. This is actually like my little baby because I enjoy this weapon so much. Going back to kind of Last Word for a second, pairing this gun with RDMs the same way you would with Last Word, it was tons of fun. It was an easy build, and it's still busted to this day, and I don't know why it doesn't get enough recognition. You could basically mouse one users just by bow walking towards them. No aiming, no nothing. This game basically plays the game for you using this gun with RDMs. It was so easy and so free, and it's still pretty good to this day. It's one of those metas that I think is still very sleeper, that people should maybe try more of, but keep that on the hush-hush because I don't need more people using this because it's not fun to fight against either. Graviton Spike. Now this is a weapon that I feel like was only good because it checked off just a lot of different boxes. For starters, it was 2 different hand cannons in one. It was a 120 RPM hand cannon as well as a 150. So if you wanted the ease of use of a 150, being able to get those crispy 3 taps, you have the option. If you want to 2 tap people, you have the option as well with the 120 variant. It's just still an all-around good hand cannon, and I wouldn't say it was busted by any means, but it definitely was something that was kind of out of whack during those early days of Edge of Fate, and it did need a little bit of a nerf, but I wouldn't say it's any worse than a lot of the other things we're going to mention today. It's definitely not worse than, you know, Lorenz Driver or literally anything else I'll mention today. Now, in terms of power weapons, I'm not going to go too intensively on these because a lot of power weapons are just dependent on, well, getting power ammo. But I will say Tractor Cannon was never fun to fight against because getting booped from a mile away was not fun. Legend of Acreus, same deal. It's a shotgun that has like 50 meters of range. Not fun to fight against. Truth is a rocket that gained more ammo than it needed. I don't know who greenlit giving this thing more than 1 rocket at a time. Just bad decision in my opinion. And the final heavy weapon I'll go ahead and mention is going to be Galahorn. When this thing first came out and Wolfpack rounds were at its peak, it was not a fun thing to fight against because somebody could completely miss their rocket shot and still somehow kill you. They could kill your teammate and somehow the Wolfpack rounds will track you and kill you. It was just not fun to fight against. But by extension, heavy ammo in general is just not fun to fight against. Moving our way into Hunter, we are going to talk about Wormhusk Crown. This was an exotic that was basically unfair to fight against. You would get any little chip damage on a hunter, they would immediately dodge around a corner and be full HP. It was not fun during the Forsaken era, especially being a Titan main. Oh my god, and I know we had One-Eyed Mask. Shut up, I know. I'll get to that soon. But Wormhusk Crown was a free instant heal, and it was just a get out of jail free card during any engagement. The amount of times you'd pop somebody in the head, they'd be 1 HP, they'd dip around the corner and dodge, and all of a sudden come around with full HP and kill you. Not fun. Never was. Never will be, and I hated this exotic, and I'm glad they nerfed it. Well, not really nerfed, they completely changed this exotic because of how busted it was. Because even after its nerf, it was still pretty good on Hunter. That's how good this exotic has been. Even after its big mega nerf, it was still very good. Mask of Bacchus is here because not too long ago, Hunters were one-shot meleeing people with this exotic. I'm glad that they changed that and fixed it finally, but still puts a sour taste in my mouth, and it makes me kind of not like this exotic for the same reasons that people might. I don't hate this thing, but I definitely think it was not a fun thing to fight against. I feel like I've said that 15 million times during this video. It's not fun to fight against, it's not fun to fight against, it's not fun to fight. I'm gonna keep saying it, okay? If you hear me say it more times, just, don't hate me. Young Ahamkara Spine. This exotic to me was like playing with an extra player. Those trip mines basically had the same amount of HP as a Guardian, if not damn near close. It was never fun to deal with, especially on the receiving end, because it was almost like you could never walk where you wanted to go. A hunter could lock down an entire lane and tell you and your entire team to never go there, because if they did, they will lose all of their HP and be one shot, and there would be a hunter nearby ready to clean up the kill. It was never fun to deal with. I hate this thing, and I'm glad it's no longer as powerful as it used to be. Gwizin's Vest. I hate this thing so much. If you played during Forsaken, you know what I'm going to say. Basically, you can get killed by somebody using the super. You would respawn, go meet them in the middle of the map, they would kill you again. You would respawn, and then somehow they would kill you a third time with the same super. It was not fun. It was not a good time. It was just not cool being killed by a Gwizin's Vest hunter because they had so much super energy. It gave you more super energy back then, and your super lasted an incredibly long time, so you could basically get 3 to 4 kills on the same person. Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna keep moving on. Stompies. This is the tried and true hunter exotic that I can't really say broke PvP in any kind of way. It was just always very good. There's a reason why people meme on others and say just look up. These are very consistent, they're widely used, and they're a fan favorite for all hunters. Like I said, I don't think they necessarily have like broken PvP in any kind of way, but for how much they have been dominant over the long term, it would be a disservice not put them on this list. Radiant Dance Machines. This is one part of the Last Word combo I mentioned earlier, but not only were they good because you could pair them with Last Word or say Lodestar, they were also good because it grants you free dodges. You get a single primary ammo weapon kill, you get a free dodge. Basically, all of a sudden, overnight, hunters never needed to worry about the class stat. You just get a single kill and get a free dodge. It was very easy to use, very consistent, and it was just free. That's the easiest way to explain this exotic. It was a free exotic that played the game for you and made things easier to do. One-Eyed Mask. This one really doesn't need much of an introduction. It gave you health, it gave you overshields, it gave you wall hacks. It was an exotic that was busted during the Forsaken era. It was probably the most notorious exotic from that time frame because nobody enjoyed going against a Titan using this thing. You basically had to pray your teammates didn't die because if they did, you were always going to be facing a Titan who had an advantage against you. That's why this thing was never fun to fight against. What is that, like my 20th time saying that? I don't know. Lorelei Splendor Helm to me has always been like the Training Wheels Titan exotic because it benefits you for playing bad. The worse you play, the more you benefit. So if you run head deep into a target and let them deal damage to you, you basically get a free heal. And while it may have never been too insanely busted, it was never fun to deal with because it basically meant if you actually did your job and tried to kill the target, they would get some health on top of that. So that gives you the difference between a 3-tap or 4-tap. ACD feedback fences might as well be the bane of every person's existence in this entire game because it was the ultimate no-you exotic. You think you're going to win that melee fight. No, you're not. Do y'all remember when Synthoceps had extended melee range? Like, do you all actually remember that? It's been like 5 years, I think, since they've nerfed it. I don't really remember the exact date they nerfed it, but yeah. This used to give you melee range. And it was some of the most fun time as a Titan, having melee range and extra melee damage. This is one of the few nerfs that I kind of wish they could revert, but I know they never will because, well, there's like nobody making content for the game anymore, so yeah. Big sad. Titans might as well be the contender for the actual worst meta in Destiny history because it was basically using wall hacks, but you create the wall in front of you. You have the ability to shoot through walls with this exotic. That's really all I need to say, and you know why that's busted. In any video game ever, really, any video game ever, shooting through walls typically is kind of taboo, typically considered cheating in one way or another, and Titan Ramparts might as well have been legal cheats for how busted they were when they're at their peak. Thank God they got a nerf. Thank God. Hoarfrost Z goes on this list because of how busted it was with Triple Behemoth Titan. You could get infinite overshields, infinite armor charge, you could stack up supers incredibly fast. It's been busted for a few different times throughout the life cycle of Destiny, and it was never really an issue with Hoarfrost Z particularly. It was just Stasis Titan in general and how Tectonic Harvest worked on that class, because getting Stasis Shards by breaking Stasis Crystals basically meant you could sit in the back of the map AFK, break a bunch of crystals, and profit in one way or another. And by that point, you have whatever you need to dominate the enemy team and win. Not fun. It was not fun to deal with. Prime PK Immortal Titan might as well been the most fun I ever had playing this game. I know that might be a hot take. I thoroughly enjoyed this meta as a Titan main. It was very fun having a good SMG that was very snappy, and you were able to kind of go from person to person, getting quick kills with that SMG. But even I will admit it was definitely out of band. SMGs have always been kind of a top contender for the best kind of weapon in PvP in one way or another, especially in those close ranges, and Peacekeepers basically made it to where dueling a Titan was impossible. You could never win. If you were using an SMG that was the exact same, and the Titan has Peacekeepers, 9 times out of 10 you would lose that fight just because they had the handling, the airborne effectiveness, and they moved faster. It was all around a very fun time to me, but I understand why they nerfed it. Do you guys remember when you could chain the lightning off of a corpse and get a free kill? It's still kind of insane that that was actually a thing that happened. Out of any exotic I mentioned, this is probably the one that was the most buggy, because it feels like that should have never been a thing that happened, but it happened, and it was in the game for way longer than it probably should have been too. Thank God they nerfed this, and whoever, I don't know how this passed testing, honestly, how did that happen? Antaeus Wards. This is another exotic that doesn't really need much of an introduction. This was the original no-you exotic. If somebody were to shoot a super at you, you could deflect it. They shot a sniper shot at you, you could deflect it. Heavy ammo, you could deflect it. And there was no real cooldown. It was like maybe half a second. It was basically every single slide. So anytime a Titan would slide around a corner and they had this exotic, they basically won every single fight. It didn't matter because they had a free shield in front of them. This was not fun to deal with. It was never fun to fight against. I said it again, I don't care. It was not a good time. Antaeus Wards is probably the contender for one of the most busted metas, and that's the second one for Titan here. Titan Ramparts and Antaeus Wards. That's insane. The very first Warlock exotic we're going to talk about is going to be the Stag. This was an exotic that even when you were behind, you had a very easy way of getting ahead. Getting killed meant you benefited your team. You would drop a rift that would grant your teammates resist, and that resist was a hefty amount, enough for them to typically revive you or get another clean pick. It was never fun to be on the receiving end of this because getting a kill on somebody and watching their corpse benefit your enemy team, it was never fun. It was one of those exotics that honestly snowballed out of band because the worse you were doing, the better your teammates were doing, and the better you were doing against the enemy team, the better they were doing against you. It was never a fun thing to deal with. Speaker's Sight was basically Classy Restoration's meta, but after Classy Restoration had left the meta. It was the easiest way to heal your teammates to full HP. Just throw a single grenade turret at your feet and watch the team fight snowball. You could basically be around a corner, granting your entire team full HP, allowing them to peek as much as possible with no repercussions. It was very easy, very free, and it was basically unplayable against because you can never get clean kills unless you were getting a headshot on somebody and getting a free instant one-hit kill. Otherwise, any chip damage you did would get immediately healed right away. Daimos Suffusion is the most recent exotic on the list that has very much broken the game. Playing against a Weavewalk Warlock with this exotic was never a good time. They would just get up in your face, drop a rift, and suspend you, and there was just literally nothing you could do. Not only that, they would run this with a glaive as well, and when you pair that with Weavewalk, it was basically a nice 1-2 combo. You can Weavewalk into your face, stab you a bunch of times, or suspend you and kill you. Just not a good playstyle to try to fight against, and even though it's been nerfed, it's still kind of good in a very scary and annoying way. Ophidian Aspects goes on this list because of that improved melee range. Now that melee range is no longer a thing even though the exotic does say it's there, but back then when you actually had that extra melee range, losing a 1v1 against a Warlock who just had half a meter more range than you, it was never a good time. Plus, it was also consistent in every other area. It gave you reload speed and weapon ready speed. So basically, in any sort of scenario in a PvP gunfight, you would always be slightly better than them. Prime Stasis, I think everybody knows, was incredibly busted, and Osmomancy gloves were absolutely a main staple of a Warlock build back then. The double Cold Snap grenades basically meant you had 2 easy ways to freeze a target, and with how powerful freeze was back then, that was basically a death sentence. Even today, it's still incredibly powerful. These have just been kind of power crept by time because having an extra Cold Snap grenade isn't as insane as it used to be. But even now, it's still pretty obnoxious to deal with. And back then, getting frozen, oh my god, like I said, it was a death sentence. There was nothing you could do. Transversive Steps might as well be the most consistent option in Destiny history. They came out in the Red War and they've been glued to every Warlock's feet since then. They've always been good, giving you movement speed and auto-reloading your guns. Just in PvP, this is a main staple for all Warlocks, and it's going to be that way till the end of time. They never really got any crazy nerfs, any crazy buffs, it's just been consistently good over the years. Next, we have Geomax Stabilizers. These were busted for 3 main reasons. For starters, you could sprint to top off your super. This was something that they eventually removed, and thank God they did, because it was never fun knowing that any Warlock that had this on would always be ahead when it came to getting their super. They could just get 3/4 of their super and then sprint into a wall. And the second reason why this was busted is because you could kill people essentially through walls. I don't know what was up with Chaos Reach at the time, but it bent space and time. You could get mini kills around corners, and it was just not a fun thing to deal with. But that leads me to the third thing that was OP about this exotic, which is that you could cancel that super early to keep even more super energy. So really, at any given time, you only really needed to get half of your super, because you could keep half of the super from 1, sprinting at a wall, and 2, canceling your super early. So once you got that first super, it basically snowballed into easy supers after that. Not a good time, and I'm glad this is more of a PvE exotic now, but when this thing was busted in PvP, you knew people were using it because you were getting killed in ways you should never have been killed. I have yapped for about 25 minutes now on the various different exotics that broke PvP. Obviously, I didn't get them all. There's probably one or two that I missed, and there's absolutely a plethora of legendary weapons that also broke PvP. So let me know if maybe you want a video on that. Go ahead and let me know what you think of some of these exotics and how they made your gameplay experience unplayable. Let me know how much you enjoyed using them. Let me know how much you hated playing against them. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for watching. You have a great day.